My music heroes, this is the Jake Feinberg Show. Welcome everybody to a Gonzo Broadcasting production. Coming to you live from the Blackwood Studios, this is the Jake Feinberg Show. And we're happy to have all of you along with us today. Urban centers in this country used to swell with regional music. Go from Indianapolis to Chicago and then to Detroit, and you'd get three different sounds. Chicago was a lightning rod for amped up young musicians to come and cut their teeth. For those lucky enough to have grown up there, it meant marinating in northern soul and elegant jass. The swirling organs with no bass pedal, the psychedelics and the melodic vocal arrangements all fusing together in the shadow of Chess and Delmark Records. My guest today lives in Nashville, but his roots are in Chicago, through and through. His charisma and loneliness are authentic in his playing and writing. He might be sitting behind a keyboard or a bass guitar, but my guest has been a part of American music history as a writer, arranger, and performer. His career includes stints with Rufus and Chaka Kahn, Glenn Frey, Chicago, the Bangor Flying Circus, Minnie Ripperton, and Howard Wales. Live from Vegas, David Hawk Wolinski, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hey man, what's going on, Jake?
How you doing, Hawk?
Well, I'm doing okay. I'm just, surviving the storm down here. We had a couple storms yesterday, but I'm still alive.
I mean, we're talking about, we're not talking tornadoes, but just rainstorms?
Well, potential tornadoes that I thought there was going to turn into some tornadoes, but they didn't. So that's terrific. So,
Hawk, can you talk a little bit to my audience about you have literally, been a mainstay in the studios for the last 3-4 decades. What are you doing? What is the vibe in Nash Vegas? I mean, as far as like it's a very when I talk to Russell Smith, it's a very competitive place. A lot of people have already carved out their niches. What niche do you have in Nash Vegas?
Well, actually, as a studio musician in Nash Vegas or Nashville, I'm not doing anything. When I got here, I was writing some country stuff, and I actually had a top 10 country record that I wrote with a group called the Buffalo Club. And so what I was doing was writing country stuff, co-writing country stuff. And I was hiring Nashville studio musicians to play on it, because to tell you the truth, the guys down here. I mean, I lived in L.A., I lived here, I lived in Chicago, I spent some time in New York, I lived in London for 4 years, and if you take all the great studio musicians of all of those towns and combined them, I don't think there'd be as many as there are in Nashville. I mean, Nashville is ridiculous.
Wow, that is really amazing. I mean, has that been played out factually? I mean, is that just sort of? It's amazing to hear that.
Oh God, I mean, it is ridiculous. There's guys down here. I mean, there's a great story. A great friend of mine, Dwayne Shockwell, who's a guitar player, played a lot on Glenn Frey records and played on Don Henley, played with Paul McCartney and stuff. And he's an excellent guitar player, killer. Moved down here, and Vince Gill. I mean, do you know who Vince Gill is?
Absolutely.
Okay, so Vince Gill. As you, I don't know if your listeners know, but I mean, of course, he's a great country singer, but he's also an incredible guitarist, and he's not only an incredible guitarist, but he won Instrumentalist of the Year 2 years in a row down here. Well, anyway, his manager is my manager, Larry Fitzgerald, and Larry called me up and said, "Hey, Vince is looking for a rhythm guitar player, a second chair guitar player. I heard Dwayne's in town," because Larry knew Dwayne. Would Dwayne like to come and see if he can get the gig? So I called Dwayne up, and Dwayne said, "Yeah, great." So Larry sent him a tape, and Dwayne is fastidious about learning everything perfectly, and so we went to do the audition, and there was all the band and everything. They're all sitting around, and Dwayne's getting ready to play, and There's Vince's guitar tech, the guy who tunes and strings up Vince's guitars. He's tuning Vince's guitars, but Vince isn't there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Dwayne says to the guy, he says, "Well, where's Vince?" And the guitar player or the guitar tech says, "Oh, I'm going to be playing Vince's parts."
Jeez.
Okay, and so needless to say, Dwayne did not get the gig. So that'll tell you something. There's guys. I mean, it's. You know, I always tell people if they're a guitar player, do not bother coming to Nashville because there's just guys, you know, cutting your lawn that'll smoke most people. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous. So
you know, tell me something. In back in the Flying Bangor Circus days with Addison Allen, Tegza. I mean, no, you just hit on two very important things. I believe. You tell me if I'm wrong. That you have these sleepers in Nashville, almost over a saturation of players, and
yes.
Right, and in the past, when the music community was more communal, you would have those quote unquote lawnmower guys coming together to form bands that would come together and play because there were more venues and there were more outlets to play, and there was more of a community vibe. You also said when you walked into the session. The band is sitting around, but it's not like there was a lot of anonymity. It wasn't like the soul brotherhood of DiCarlo and Tegza and Wolinsky and H. Way. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say is like there's an anonymity aspect to music which strips it of the soul. And I'm just curious as to, you know, people can have all the chops in the world, but it's a little bit different when it's more of when you just get the feeling that it's not a community. I was hoping you could talk about, you know, juxtapose this studio's time as opposed to what was happening back in Chicago.
Well, this is a really incredible community, and to give you an example, when I first got here, and I had like these 5 tunes that I wrote, right?
Right.
And I wanted to get them demoed, right? So I hired this guy. I can't remember his name offhand. He's a bass player. And I hired him because he knew how to translate my songs into the Nashville number system. And he also was a guy who was contracting people. And it turns out that unlike L.A. or New York, where, you know, you got triple scale guys or the yo cats, so to speak, those guys will only work for triple scale and they only work on the top stuff. Well, you can get the triple scale yo cats down here. If they're not working, they'll come down here and they'll work for you for like $90 a tune, $100 a tune.
Wow, that's great.
Oh, it's really incredible. And this guy that I hired to translate my songs into the Nashville number system. This guy literally, and I'm not exaggerating, he would listen to the song, and as he listened to the song, did not know what key the song was in. Didn't matter because the Nashville number system is, you know, 1 represents a 1 chord. So if you're in C, 1 represents C. If you're in F, 1 represents F, et cetera, et cetera. And so, like, if you're in C, a 2 would be a D chord, a D minor chord. So anyway, so he would listen to these songs from top to bottom, and as he was listening to them, he would write the numbers down as it went by. His ears were so attuned to the intervals. It was like amazing. It was like I thought, well, this is there's no need for me to even try to go to do studio work here unless it's some specifics. I did some stuff, you know. I did some stuff. I played in a couple little bands down here. I don't know if you ever heard of Max Carl. Did you ever hear of Max Carl?
How do you spell? Is it Karl or C?
He was with 38 Special.
No, I haven't heard of him.
This Heart Needs a Second Chance, but he was also in a band in L.A. called Jack Mack and Heart Attack. Mm-hmm. He's actually the only guy. He's a white guy, big, tall, 6'7", 6'6" white guy. Sings like James Brown. In fact, this is also true. He's the only person, white or black, that James Brown ever put his cape on.
No.
Like, they opened for James at a show, and James heard the band and came out and put his cape on Max. So I played in a band here in Nashville for a couple of years, and it was all the top players in Nashville, and it was called Max Carl and Big Dance, and it was like an 11-piece band. 2 drummers, percussionist, the North Texas State horn section,
Sure.
North Texas State University, myself on Hammond, and Josh Leo, a really incredible guitar player, producer from down here, who's actually originally from Chicago, played with a band called The Flock. And it was people would just like, their jaws would drop, you know. But I never felt compelled to get into the studio scene here, because even in L.A., I went from doing a lot of sessions and stuff. I was more interested in production and writing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I did many sessions with Quincy, and that I played on The Dude, I played on George Benson records, I played on Michael Jackson records, I played on Patty Austin records, I played on Brothers Johnson, you know. So even though I did that stuff, it was like, boy, the whole session scene was like, boy, what a dead end. You could make a lot of money, but you had to work an awful long time to make that money. And once that money was made, there were no royalties. So I enjoyed writing, you know. So just for the audience. I play, not to interrupt, but I play on, you know, on the stuff that I produced. I played on most of it, you know, either, you know, in some way, you know, either keyboards or programming or guitar or bass or whatever. Sorry to interrupt.
No. I mean, it is interesting to hear about the grind of the evolution of the studio scene as well, because even, you know, I talked to, you know, Bernard Purdy or
Sure.
Chuck Rainey, you know, those guys, and it was
a legend.
Yeah, I mean, and you think about them in the New York studio scene with, you know, Cornell Dupree and Richard
Sure.
T. But those guys before, like Everett Barksdale and Bob Bushnell, and there were other cats too. It was so interesting to hear. I mean, they were the younger guys. So,
Yeah.
Chuck and Bernard, they'd wind up like, you know, they were living in New York, and those older cats had already made enough money to move out to Long Island. So a lot of times, if there was weather problems, you know, the guys couldn't take the LIRR to New York. So Chuck and Bernard were getting those gigs. And
Sure.
it was not like, you know, it wasn't like necessarily a situation where you might have a shortstop like Derek Jeter 17 years into his career, and he's going to mentor the new guy. That didn't work like that. It was pretty cutthroat, and it was exhausting because, like you said, you do the same.
Extremely exhausting. I mean, I remember you know, Paul, there's a great guitarist in Los Angeles and a big-time session player, and I mean, he just plays on everything. I've used him a million times. A really nice guy, Paul Jackson Jr. And I remember, you know, because I used to use him, and we'd play, and then, you know, there'd be some sessions that I'd play on, like for Q, and, you know, and we'd play on together. And I remember, you know, I started to get into production and started to become, you know, successful at it. And I remember Paul said, well, how come these guys are, you know, how come these guys all call you for the production? And, you know, they'll call me or anything. I said, Paul, because you were a real studio guy, and I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like I realized, you know, he never wanted to cut that cord, because if you decide to go into production, there's no guarantee that you're going to become a producer. You know what I'm saying? You got to get lucky. My lucky break in production was when I wrote "Ain't Nobody," and for Rufus and Chaka Kahn, and
right.
it became a hit and on the R&B charts and somewhat on the pop charts. But over the years, it's been recut a million times, et cetera, et cetera. But when I wrote that song, people immediately called me and say, "Hey, do you got any songs like that? You know, for us, you know, all the R&B people. I mean, everybody. You know what I mean?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I do." But I said, "But I'm not going to just give them. I want to produce. I want to produce the stuff." And they said, "No problem." So that's the way it went. I kind of held them hostage in a way. If they wanted my material, they'd have to get my production. So.
Right, it wasn't like you were just going to give it over to some other guy to do it.
No, because the thing is that my demos were so specific that it would be a guy just like copying it. I mean, it'd be like, I'm not going to, you know, it's like they weren't just piano and you know, vocal. They were demos, full-on demos with drums and guitar and everything, pianos and everything else. I mean, I've got a demo of the original "Ain't Nobody" with me singing it that sounds like exactly like the real track. Sans Shaka's voice. So
I don't think I could talk to a better person than you and I don't want this to come off the wrong way, but I mean, you made this Ain't Nobody, this amazing song that just everybody and their mother was coming after you to you had promised the song already to Russ Tittleman.
Yeah,
and even though Quincy wanted it for Michael Jackson's Thriller,
that's right. I mean, there was a big, it was. I played it for Russ, and Russ said, "Oh God, we got to have this," and then somehow Quincy got a hold of it. Because Quincy's Mr. Song. I mean, he finds, he's like the song. He's like the Sherlock Holmes of finding songs, and he was the guy that taught me that the best song wins. He said, Honk, he said, let me tell you. He said, 50% of something is better than 100% of nothing. He said, you got a lot of these people, they're putting out albums and they're writing their own songs because they know that publishing is valuable. He said, but if all the songs are crap, he said, you sell 10 copies.
That's right.
Maybe write one song, or maybe if you can't, So when Quincy produced Master Jam, it was a very funny, interesting process. What he did was, we'd go to his house, and you could present songs, right? But they had to be presented on a cassette that did not have your name on it. And you could not say that was your song while we were listening to it, even though people might know because they hear your voice or something like that or whatever. But you could not make a plea for the thing. And so what would happen would be the songs would get played, and everybody sit around, and they'd vote. And they'd say, yeah, I like that. Let's do that, or you know what I mean. And then if the song didn't make the cut, it would go in a garbage can. He had this big garbage can, and it would go in the trash. And he had like a sign, I believe, in his house that said "The best song wins."
That's so great. It's such a powerful story. I have not gotten to Quincy Jones, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to because he is so. He's walking in space, but it's like the thing is, for him, he's taken everybody's ego out of it. There's so much anonymity.
Check your ego at the door. That's another one of his big deals.
Yeah, because that's what he's doing, because he's saying, you're sitting there, you're getting all excited because it's your song, even though you can't talk about it. Yes. And it's really up to the ears, and it takes away all the sort of potential unobjective listening. It's based, it's saying just listen to it as music, nothing else. That's
right. And there was a piece that I had written on the Master Jam record. It was called "Do You Love What You Feel?" And I played it for Quincy, and he goes, I really like this, but the bridge, I don't, can you do something with the bridge? So I tried to do something with the bridge, and he said, I don't like that either. And he said, try it again. So I tried it again, and I did it like 2 or 3 times. And I said, Q, I said, I'm telling you, I've always felt that the original bridge is great, and I'm just, I'm not doing this anymore. So we either do the song with the original bridge or not. And he goes, I was just pushing to see if you really liked the bridge.
I'm gonna have to sit on that. What was that? This is the psychological head games.
Yes,
there.
It was a psychological thing. He wanted to see how committed I was to the bridge because he had thoughts about. He didn't. He was a little bit trepidations about the bridge, but he wanted to know. He wanted to see if I agreed with him or if he was maybe off base.
Talking to Hawk Wolinsky here, and I got to ask you right off the bat.
Yeah.
Let's just get it on the table here. When was the first time that you crossed paths with H. Wales?
Oh well, that's.
Because Howard, let me tell you something. The fact that it's interesting. I have a dear friend who helps me engineer this show. His name is Jim Blackwood, and I just know that when I did that interview with Howard, because he's such a recluse, and he'll never even hear this interview unless we burn a copy for him.
Oh, that's right. Forget about it.
But the thing is that I know that sort of lent me some instant credibility within the quote unquote Garcia band community.
Oh, sure.
So I just when he told me, out of anybody, because he really has had. Over time, Howard, as anybody has fought his own demons and figured out, but he said the one guy he hit me to was Hawk Wolinsky. So I'm like, how the heck did you guys find each other?
Well, it's a simple story actually. He was. Do you know James Vincent, the guitar player?
Oh yeah.
You know what? The monster of all time. I mean,
well, he was related to. He was somebody's cousin. I forget who's.
The Tommy Dollinger's brother.
I'm obsessed with the Gravity Adjusters expansion band. That the Tom Dollinger was in that,
yeah.
And then Jim Vincent was the guitar player. Sure.
Right, but so Jimmy was up. Jimmy was up at Caribou Ranch when I was living up there. Well, I knew Jimmy from Chicago, from Aorta and stuff like that, and he was always like, oh my God! People would just look at him and just go, oh my God.
What did he look like?
No, inhuman guitar player.
Okay, yeah, I've listened to him on Rendezvous with the Sun, that Howard Wales album. It's insane.
Howard was on that, right?
Right, that's his album.
But I had left Madura, and I moved to San Francisco, and James and I we're doing this little band. I don't even know if we had a name, but we had this incredible saxophone player, musician, this guy, Billy McPherson. I don't know if you've ever heard of this guy, but without question, in all of my life on earth, I have never met a musician that can hold a candle. Never met a musician or never heard of a musician that can hold a candle to Billy McPherson.
I do not know who this cat is. I know Charles McPherson, but not
No,
Bill.
no. Billy McPherson was, Tio Macero saw him and said, the greatest alto player since Charlie Parker. He was first chair.
Tio Macero said that?
Pardon?
Tio Macero said that?
Yes.
Wow.
He was first chair alto player for the Air Force Airmen of Note.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, so I'm playing in this band with Jim, myself, with Billy, and I think Tommy was playing with. Lenny White was playing with us for a minute.
What was the name of the band?
I don't even remember.
You have to be. Where are the tapes? This is. Were you playing bass?
I have some tapes of that. Of an incarnation of that band, and Pete Escovedo was playing, was doing some percussion with us.
Sure.
His daughter Sheila used to show up and jam, and she would stand on an apple crate. We used to rehearse in Oakland. Anyway, so I'm playing keyboards and stuff like that, and Jim from Money would do some gigs with this guy Howard Wales, right?
All right.
This, crazy organ player from San Francisco.
Yeah.
And I went down and saw them jam a couple times and stuff like that, and over at
the Matrix
Heliport.
Yes.
Down in Sausalito, where they had that studio down there. It was like total insanity. But anyway,
was it Walt Dixon's farm or something? There was a jam session at the Heliport. You're right, the Heliport.
A heliport.
Yes.
It was like a helicopter. It's like, it's just goofy, you know what I mean? Hippies and all this shit. Anyway, Howard had a couple of gigs coming up. One at I think it was Winterland, or Fillmore West. Fillmore West, and Winterland, one of those. One big venue, a big Graham thing. Bill
Graham, yeah.
I think he had one or two gigs there, and maybe one gig. It was like 3 gigs total, right? And his bass player bailed on him, or whatever. And so, he said. So somehow, Jimmy said to me, "Hey, you play bass? Do you want to play?" He said, "This stuff's pretty easy." And I said, "Oh, okay, let's try it." So I went. And I played bass with Howard, and it's like I'm a Hammond organ player, and I'm playing bass guitar with Howard Wales. It's like hysterical. What a fascinating piece of history there. It was really weird.
I mean, H. Wales, that guy. Yeah, because the fact is that when I think of you, at least in the earlier incarnations, I really feel as you as a bass player, but actually you consider yourself a Hammond player. I mean,
yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, I mean, because
in the Madura stuff, it's all me playing left-hand bass and pedals, and same thing in Bangor. We had no bass player.
Boy, that it's so funny because let's go back in the time warp here. We got a track here I pulled out of the archives, and we'll come back and talk about it. Okay.
Sure.
Just to spend a few moments alone with you. Don't let me go this way on my own. Our world is so lonely without your love. It's just a cry. I'm begging you, just one more time. I said one more
Well, Ode to Sadness. I don't know when the last time you heard that.
Oh, good God. Probably right after I recorded it.
I got to tell you, that's been in heavy rotation in my household with my family, and I don't want to be. I have an album from a piano player, Barry Miles. I don't know if you know that name, but he was a jazz, kind of almost a prodigy. And in '72, he did something similar with the scats singing over the ivory. But I mean, when?
Well, I'm going to tell you. I'll tell you something about that.
Please.
About the scatting.
Yeah.
As far as I know, okay, and as far as I can trace it back. Well, Al got that scatting from this guy, this guitar player, a local guy in Chicago, an incredible jazz guitar player named Carmen Mena. And this guy would go around, and he sang like Johnny Mathis, and played guitar like Wes Montgomery. He was an absolute monster, and drop-dead good-looking Italian guy. He was unbelievable, and he just would just do this solo act, right? And he made so much money because he would, he would have no overhead at all. He'd walk in, he'd plug his guitar in, and he was just flawless. Well, Al got it from him. Al actually took lessons from Carmen. And I believe, because at the time we were playing, we started to play down in Chicago, George Benson was down there playing, doing some stuff with Jack McDuff and things.
That's right.
And I honestly believe, and I have no reason to disbelieve this, but I honestly believe that George came and saw us and saw Al doing that and picked that up from Al because back then there was such it was the greatest music scene, in my opinion, in the history of the world.
Tell me why.
Well, there were 50 clubs within like 2 miles. Everybody would literally on a given night. This would be a lineup of who'd be playing. You have Frank Sinatra at the Happy Medium. You'd have McCoy Tyner at this one club. You'd have right across the street. You'd have Sam and Dave. You'd have George Benson playing with Jack McDuff right around the corner. You'd have Rod Stewart and Small Faces playing. You'd have Baby Huey and the Babysitters. You'd go down and you go get Sam Lay and Mike Bloomfield playing. Corky Siegel. It was the list of the bands that were playing on the same night, within walking distance in many cases, was just unprecedented. Every night for like 2 or 3 years. Can you
talk about, because you mentioned, we're talking about rock, we're talking about blues, because that's what I love about Bangor is just the shuffle. There's such a shuffle in that music, and talk about as a musician, it's a little bit more difficult, but the Chicago itself is a pretty hip place. But how do you think that affected the urban? How should I say this? The urban vibe by having that much music, and it would go on till the wee morning hours.
Oh my God! It went on till 4 a.m. There was a 3-year period or so that I did not get home 6 days a week. I did not get home before the sun rose.
Right. People were going to church, and you were going to bed.
Yeah, that's it.
And that, but the ability for regular folks, journalists, avid fans, carpenters, businessmen, to me it just seemed a lot more communal. And
oh my God!
Yeah.
And here is the other beautiful thing. The reason I say that, the reason I made that statement about that speculative statement about Benson coming to see us and maybe picking that up from Al was because one thing that will always happen, like when you had a break, because we'd be doing 4 sets a night, so would everybody else, right?
Right.
Minimum 3-4 sets a night, right? All the musicians, from when they had a break, they'd go see whoever was playing, because everybody didn't take a break at the same time. So people were just, I remember a couple of nights where all of Frank Sinatra's horn section, the guy with Rich Fidoli, Art Hoyle, all these incredible players would come in with their tuxes on, because Frank would only do 2 shows. So they'd come in with their tuxes on, and they'd come in after the show, and they'd come in and jam with us. So we would have some kind of goofy jam, to where anybody who'd show up would sit in. It was, it was like that sort of thing. So, at any given moment, any of us would be at the other person's gig. So we'd go see George and go see, Jack McDuff, or we'd go down and just sneak in. And the club owners would always let us in because we were local musicians, and so, they're not going to stop us. Come on in and listen, whatever. So we'd go catch Wayne Cochran and the CC Riders. We'd go catch Sam and Dave, a couple of the numbers, or whoever was playing, you know what I mean? And then you'd have Chicago playing, and Illinois Speed Press, and all these other bands, and Cheap Trick. And and there were so many clubs that it was very communal. In fact, that was what made it so great, because everybody kind of knew everybody else, and everybody went to see everybody else, because what else did you have to do if you had an hour and a half break or something like that, or an hour break?
And I see the and I fall victim to it as well. Nowadays, you walk anywhere and people are just staring at their phones, and I'm guilty of it as well. But there was nobody was plugged in back. You're plugged into your amp, maybe, but you really,
right.
During it was the same thing in New York. Al McKibben took Cal Jader to see Willie Bobo and Mongo Santa Maria. And that's when he was with George Shearing. So when George Shearing had a break, Al McKibben, the bass player, said, "Hey, man, Cal, you got to come see let's go down to the Palladium." So they went. He saw Mongo. He saw Willie Bobo. Next thing you know, he's asking him, come to the West Coast and be in a band with me. But that's how you had major figures who always believed that the music was always above them. And I think that's what made it so awesome, is that you had local musicians with serious chops and a lot of love and soul, and bigger guys coming from out of state coming in and being equally respectful, and then having these jam sessions. It wasn't like a charity thing. It was love, man.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was no. This was like, and stuff was being, there was stuff being like invented back then. Stuff being, breakthroughs. People were making, musical breakthroughs back then. I mean, Coltrane. He'd play down in, down in Old Town. You'd get, Miles would be in. I mean, it was insane. It was like you couldn't, it was so exciting. You just never wanted to go to bed. You just wanted to go around and go and see these guys play. It was like, holy cow.
Did you? Yeah, no, but I mean, when around this time, around Medora, actually, I remember talking to some of the guys that were in Herbie's band, Herbie Hancock's band. They'd go to the London house for a month.
Absolutely.
A month.
Yeah.
I mean, a month of, and that means that the band is bonding together. And I mean, that's what.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is what was so great.
They said they're reading. Go ahead.
Sinatra would play a week at Mr. Kelly's. I mean, come on. I mean, the way, and then you go literally, 150 yards the happy medium, and there's McCoy Tyner.
That's right.
With Coltrane with Coltrane playing sax on, but it's billed as McCoy Tyner, and he's downstairs, and he's there for like 2 weeks, and then across the street, literally across the street, it's Wayne Cochran, and literally across the street from that, it's like on one corner there were 4 clubs, and on any given night it was ridiculous, right? So the education, oh my God, that's how I got into I used to go down to Old Town and watch these organ trio guys, like this guy Prince James, his name was.
Right.
Was literally 16 years old when I first went down there. I snuck out of my mom's house. I snuck out of my house. And I went down there, and I was standing. They played, and the organ was like it was like looked like a storefront, and he's got his back to me, right? And he's got like a cigarette in one hand, and he's playing this little bebop stuff, Larry Young. I mean, it's just like ridiculous with a sax player and a drummer, and it's so good. And I'm standing, I'm freezing my ass off, right? And he turns around, and he sees me, and he goes, and he takes his finger and says, "Come in," So I come in like that, and he goes, "How old are you?" And I said, "I'm 16." He said, "Do you like organ?" I said, "Oh, you kidding?" He goes, "Sit right over here." So he just let me sit there and watch him. You know what I mean? It was like.
It was the same thing that a lot of guys talk about, the accessibility to these people that were larger than life, and being able to be in a small, compact place, and to be able to hear as opposed to the rock venue, the larger venues that's more spacious and less intimate, but
and much less scary. I mean, much easier. I've performed in front of hundreds of thousands of people at big pop festivals, and I guarantee you the pressure of playing in a club with like 100 people sitting right next to you, there's no comparison.
Exactly.
No. I remember Rufus and Chaka Kahn. We did all these. We were playing like Omni, for 15, 20,000, 30,000 seats, whatever. We had this gig at Roxy in L.A.
Mm-hmm.
And Roxy's like probably 150 people, right? So we got 5 nights there, right? And and I'll never forget opening night. I mean, I look over to the right, and there's Jack Nicholson, Warren Beatty, and Diane Cannon, literally like about 5 feet away, sitting at a table. So now I got to, and they're kind of on the side, so they could see my hands playing. So it's like, oh my God, you want to talk about pressure? I mean, forget about it.
Right. That's really interesting to hear that. You get into a situation where it's like 40,000, 50,000 people.
That's a joke. That's a joke. I mean, with the lights shining on, you can't even see them. I mean, you see 2 rows. It's like, who cares?
I wanted to ask you, there was a couple of some of the other thing that was amazing is because you had so much studio work going on at that time. There were all these guys, local guys like Phil Upchurch. There was a organ player, Odell Brown.
Well, Odell Brown and the organizers. He ended up playing with. Oh my God, that was another guy I used to go see.
Odell Brown. I got to get my hands. He did some albums on Cadet, like Mellow Yellow, some really really good stuff. But
he played with Marvin Gaye. That's
right. And I'm thinking, and then you had McDuff doing all this like Gin and Orange, and just like, I mean, living the music they were playing.
In fact, I replaced Odell Brown with Minnie Ripperton.
Thank you for segueing into that, because Charles Stepney was involved at that. How did you know Stepney?
No, I didn't. He was not in the band at the time, I don't believe. Of course, there was a lot of drugs going around.
When did you join Minnie? Because it was like she did like those albums, Come to My Garden and other things.
It was right after. It was after, of course, Lovin' You, and it was right after Lovin' You. I can't remember the exact year, but after Lovin' You, it was after the first album, maybe after the second. That I toured with her for about a year or two. And we opened for Stevie Wonder. That was a trip. That was, boy, Stevie, what a wild man. And then what happened was with that, then that went on, and it was really fun and everything. And I just had a great time with them. And I knew Maya. Maya. I got pictures of Maya when she was like 2 years old and all that stuff. And Dick Rudolph was such a wonderful guy. I mean, they were so in love and everything. So, we just got done finishing the tour, and we were on retainer. They had us on retainer, and all of a sudden I get a call from Jack Kelman, the manager, and says, well, we got to take you off retainer because Minnie's got breast cancer. And, so literally the day Jack Kelman calls me up and tells me this, I get another phone call. I'm getting ready to walk out the door, and it's Kevin Murphy of Rufus. And the original founding member, right? Mm-hmm. And he calls me up. He goes, "Hawk, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm going out. I'm going down to the store." He goes, "No, I mean, what's going on with Minnie?" And I said, "Well, it's funny you should ask because they just took us off retainer and because she's got breast cancer." And I said, "I don't know what's going on. This is not a good thing." He goes, "Well, we fired Gavin and Christopher. We're looking to get another keyboard player. You want to come audition?" And I said, hell yeah. So I went down, set up my Rhodes. We sat down and jammed, like not very much said. But I smoked it, right? I thought anyway. And so I just kind of got up and I said, boys, I either got this gig or I don't, because if I don't, I got to go get one. So figure it out. Otherwise, I'm out of here. They hired me on the spot, and that's it.
Wow. No, I was gonna. I saw that. There's a great video on YouTube of you talking with the guys.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
But that is in itself, sort of the idea of timing and just letting go, but also
serendipity.
Yeah, serendipity, but also the idea of letting go of. I think across all walks of life, I mean, I can say for myself, letting go of control and not allowing letting the insecure way be the secure way, and then ultimately being bold enough to demand an answer after the session, basically say.
I've always been, my idea is move forward, power through things.
Right, exactly.
I don't like to vacillate. I would rather make a mistake, right, and live with the mistake than not do anything. You know what I mean? You can't get a hit unless you get up to bat. I mean, people vacillate, so long that they vacillate themselves out of a gig, out of a potential gig or out of potential success. So I I like to make quick decisions on things, because I believe in that. I read that book by Malcolm Gladwell, Blink, and I believe that. I believe that that your first decision on things is usually correct. And so I got pretty good instincts, and it served me well so far. So that's the way I do things.
You can vacillate during a 12-minute Bangor circus jam, but you can't vacillate when it comes to making decisions about your career. And I think that
no, you gotta make. Oh no, it's the worst thing because the styles change and everything changes and people's loves and art. And what's art today is one man's feast is another man's famine. I mean, it's a. I don't know.
One man gathers what another man spills. Listen. Let's. I want to cue up another piece of music again, showing the dexterity.
But did you get that best of your heart?
I did. No, but we're gonna cue this. I want to cue this other piece up because I pulled this out of my friend's storage shed the other day, and so we'll come back and we'll pick it up as well as it did back then.
Well, Jimmy, Jesus, Jimmy was he's the mad genius. I mean, come on. I mean, this guy. You can't. I mean, he's the kind of guy you could love and you could hate because he was always smarter than you. He never took any drugs, which meant that he had more control over you than he really should.
That's right.
So, and he was a great musician, a great arranger, a super smart guy, and not just in music. I mean, this guy was a historian and a film historian, and he was just incredible. I mean, he was like. He didn't have a tremendous sense of humor. Again, because he wasn't high.
Right, he wasn't. He was sober.
Yes, so he probably didn't see the humor. When you get drunk, I mean, everybody. Most people get drunk to make other people interesting. So.
I think the point is that, I've talked to some guys that were, guys like Denny Zeitlin who their careers were highlighted by guys like John Hammond in New York, but Guercio, is that how you pronounce his last name? Guercio. He was was he like the main man for Columbia in the Midwest? I mean, how did he?
He was the main man he was like probably the most important producer Columbia had for maybe 10 years in a row or whatever. Because he did all the Chicago stuff. He did Blood, Sweat, and Tears. He had the Beach Boys. He did he owned the publishing of everybody. He had the Caribou Ranch, that everybody recorded at, and he had a hugely powerful business consortium. Of the big gigantic offices in L.A. I mean, the guy was just. He was something, man.
But did he? I guess my question is this, because I know exactly what you're talking about as far as being educated, being sophisticated, and then of course being sober. Mm-hmm. But I'm looking at side one here, and this stuff is out of print just for the audience's sake. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're going to have to find this on vinyl. I don't know if you can get it on iTunes or not, but
you can.
You can get it on iTunes, but I have the vinyl copy, and the side one is all Hawk piano, Drinking No Wine, Dreams, Plain as Day, My Love is Free. So Guercio clearly had an ability to let the musicians do what they did best.
Listen, let me tell you something. There is no doubt that he would let you do what you wanted to do, but he was extremely persnickety about the way it was recorded. Do you know what I'm saying? And the performances. Do you know what I mean?
Can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, I mean, he like the recording process, the engineering process. I mean, Phil Ramone I worked with Phil, and he had all Wayne Tarnowski, who did all the, he was the house engineer up at Caribou. He did all the Weather Report records. I mean, he was, it had this, everything had to sound, the separation. It was much more difficult back then because obviously you're working with 2-inch tape. There's no way to, fix. It's very difficult to fix things in the mix like you can now with computers and things, and mic placement and leakage and and buzz, and he was just, everything had to be perfect. So we took a lot of time setting things up, more time setting it up than playing it. And then when we played it, you had to play it perfect. I mean, there were no edits back then. We didn't do it. Everything was just, what you see is what you get, right? And as Madura, we appreciated that because that was the way Jimmy made records. But we personally, I don't think we felt like we should have made records like that. I mean, our real forte was live. I mean, that tape that I sent you of us playing live with me playing bass guitar is an example of that. And then I have some other stuff that I could send you as well of us live. That the energy and the performances on these little live tapes that I have far outshine anything that we ever put on record with Jimmy. And we used to say, that Jimmy had the ability to homogenize too much, to homogenize things too much, to usurp the soul out of it by just being so persnickety about sound and about everything, just perfection. He was a perfectionist, right? And, I wasn't a big believer. I don't believe music's perfect. I mean, music has a soul, you know what I'm saying? And it shouldn't be, like if you listen to old Rolling Stones records and you hear Mick Jagger playing tambourine, it sounds like he's playing to a different song. I mean, he's so off the beat. But the
right.
and then Bill Wyman's like behind the beat, and then what's his face is up ahead of the beat. But the whole thing, it comes together and it works in an odd way. You know what I mean?
Well, no, it's exactly. I mean, I play, the Grateful Dead or Jerry Garcia band, and those guys did not have the best voices in the world by far. But it was the soul, pouring the soul into the music. I mean, it just, to me, you get inside the song. But
it was what it was, and they didn't, they weren't asking you to like it. They were just asking you to listen to it.
Exactly.
And if you liked it, that was good. I guarantee you, if you didn't, they wouldn't care.
It was a no shtick. I mean, that's what
they would not. They would go, fine. Nobody showed up. Who cares? Roll another doob.
The question, because I mean, this is really important for my analysis of this time period. Obviously, Garcia was a perfectionist, but the idea of today, as a producer, some singer could be singing and she could say, "How do I sound, Hawk?" And you said, "Terrible. Come up, we'll fix it." You could do that today.
Right.
But what were some of the advantages of knowing that you had to be spot on because you had?
That's really easy. I mean, I first of all, I am a technocrat, so I not only love technology, but I consider myself, at the top of the heap when it comes to understanding technology. I mean, all of today's technology. There's virtually nothing that I don't know how to do on a computer, on any kind of a computer, in any kind of operating system. So I have followed the whole technological revolution from its inception, from the very beginning, pre-MIDI, the early synthesizers, up through MIDI, up through, when we were using FSK tones to sing things up to where, into computers. I've had 30 Apple computers, maybe 50. I have no idea. I had the first Apple computer, so I followed it all up. And it's funny you should ask that question because, I saw how okay, now we've got flying faders and we can automate this, right? Okay, so now that means we can fix it later. And you'd be surprised how many times we would say, and this started to happen when I was working with Frey, well, we can fix it later, we can fix it the next, we can do that. And pretty soon, the whole song became about mixing it.
Right.
The performance, it used to be the performance was 80% of it and the mix was 20%, something like that, right? Well, those numbers started to reverse as technology got bigger and bigger and more powerful, and computers got more and more powerful. The ability to do it later, meant that whatever soul was created during the performance had a good chance of disappearing through manipulation of some sort, through electronic manipulation, and that's when music started to change, and it became much more techno and much where people started to realize, well, shit, I don't have to know how to play anything. I mean, you got guys that are making records now they're making some cool records. Don't get me wrong. I love tons of stuff. What's going on? There's a guy named Skrillex. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's like a dance guy, and this guy makes records on his laptop, literally. He can't play a thing. And he just makes these records. He gets loops, and he puts this whole thing together. And it's wild stuff, and it's really cool. But the point is it's not a performance.
No.
It's piecemeal. It's like one thing at a time, and he puts this on top of it and puts it. And it's this crafted thing. It's a completely different thing than what we did. So in answer, I guess, going back, I'm circumnavigating the whole premise that you laid out about the technology. But I think... in reality, it's that whole thing has definitely taken the soul out of a lot of music, and that's why I think we're in the state we're in. That plus the fact that there's only 12 notes in Western music, and all of every melody that's every 4-bar. There's no 4-bar melodies that can be invented. Quincy told me that 20 years ago. There was a guy that offered, a friend of his, a musicologist in Switzerland, offered a $50,000 prize for anyone who could write an original 4-bar melody. Cannot be done.
Well, it's funny. I just had Bob Moses, the drummer, on the program, and he said that, it's not the instruments, the apparatus itself does not change, but it's the individual and the soul inside the individual that allows for invention. And what you were talking about with Bangor at that time, because there was so much opportunity, 4 corners, 4 clubs on 4 corners, and you could play instruments with, and so stuff, the more the individual was hearing stuff in odd time signatures or with different percussive instruments, different world instruments, all of a sudden, that's when you start to get sounds from other worlds.
Right. Well, you had to, it was, like it's always been it always was back then, about immediacy. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
So you when you got into that situation, you had to think. You had to really keep your you had to keep your thinking cap on. If you wanted to keep up, if you wanted so. It was sort of like you wanted to blend with all the players, and then yet you wanted to kind of do your own thing. So it was this balance, this dance that you did, But now, you lose that because if you're tracking, you lose that because in the back of your mind that you can fix this later or do. You understand? So the concentration level, I don't have to sing that thing, perfectly. You know what I mean?
Right. The edge.
Whereas
it's that edge.
If you really try to sing it perfectly, as if it's your own, as if it's your last thing, if you really try to do that, you may not sing it perfectly, but you will bring an energy to the whole thing that will change the vibe of the song. And that is something that, there's no substitute for, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, don't do a half-assed performance because that you can fix it later, because the half-assed performance is going to make everybody else kind of play half-assed. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like garbage in, garbage out,
No, it's like like Quincy said, you got 50% of something good. Go with that instead of 100% of, wasting your time on something not so.
That's right. I mean, so, so that is the difference. And I noticed it, and I even said it. I remember saying it distinctly to Glenn, because I said, this is a slippery slope here. I said, he said, what do you mean? I said, well, we're saying we can fix this later. And normally, we'd be pushing to get the great performance, but knowing that we can fix it later, we're not pushing to get the great performance. So what does that mean? I mean, and his argument was, well, we'll get it later. We'll make it a great performance. I said, yeah, but the great performance is what is influential in the track, in the doing of the track, in the actual making of the track. When I can't tell you how many times I sat down with J.R., the drummer, the great J.R. John J.R. Robinson, who I discovered, by the way, and did all the did everything for Quincy. Replaced Michael Jackson replaced what's his name, Harvey Mason on the Off the Wall record. After I turned Quincy onto him,
wow.
I mean, you'd be playing with Jr. and like he'd play some stuff and you go, and it'd be like, oh my God! I mean, this is it would just make you play really great. I mean, it just makes you play stuff that you never thought you could play. Now, if he didn't do that, then I wouldn't play that stuff that I thought I couldn't play.
That's right.
That stuff didn't come from a vacuum. Mm-hmm. The stuff that I'm playing didn't come from a vacuum. It came from this group of guys communing, you know what I mean, and feeding off each other. That's why you get stuff that, it sounds crystal clear and it sounds really great, but the performances aren't, the real performances aren't there. I don't know, you know what I'm saying? Does that make any sense?
Hawk, I got to tell you, I've done over 300 interviews. This will be my final one before I leave for overseas with my family, and
right.
I think that I'm much more interested in a authentic performance, even if there's a little bit of mustard and ketchup on the shirt.
Oh man, thank you.
I don't. Throw if I'm eating a hot dog at a Wildcats game, which by the way, you also did the soundtrack for Goldie Hawn's Wildcat, and this is Wildcat country down here. But I just want to say, I'm more interested in seeing the gut bucket approach than the very nice might sound crystal, but yet it's stripped of that. But we have a lot more to do, and we will pick it up at the end of the summer. We have a lot more to get to with Hawk Wolinsky, but I just wanted to thank you, Hawk, for taking the time and spread the word, man. Get this up on the website and get this out there, because there were some nuggets in there, and I can't thank you enough.
Well, listen, thank you, Jake. I love the questions. You're good at what you do, and you make somebody feel comfortable, and you ask the right questions, and you're a good listener.
Well, I appreciate, and listen, Stan, we'll be in touch, and when I get back into the States, we'll do some more.
All right, my friend, take care of yourself.
Take care, brother. Okay. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, and we'll see y'all after Taiwan.